Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. We're excited to have you join us. If you can hear my voice and you can see our opening screen with the picture of the students and Virtual Affairs Launch Webinar and Training, please let us know. If you can hear me and see us, please let us know. We'll be right back with you in a minute. All right, welcome back. We're excited to be here with all of you today. Before we get started, I'm going to let everyone know just a few housekeeping notes. First, we will be recording this webinar, so anyone who has registered will receive a recording right after the event. You can also forward this on to any of your colleagues who have registered or haven't registered. They're also welcome to watch the recording. So that will be coming right at you momentarily. Next, we will have a short Q&A session at the end of this webinar, but per usual, you don't need to wait till the end to ask your questions. You can simply type them into the chat box and we will answer them as we go through the webinar. Do keep in mind that we typically get thousands of questions per webinar, so we will not be able to answer every single question. We tend to look for common themes, common questions. Those are the ones that will bubble up, and we will do our best to get to as many as we possibly can. If for any reason your very specific question doesn't get answered in today's webinar, you're always welcome to come to our open office hours every Thursday to ask specific questions there as well. And finally, we will be following up with emails that contain more information and a link to the recording, as well as all of the resources that we have prepared for you. And finally, right after the webinar, you're going to see a super fast survey pop up. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you could just take a few moments to spare and give us your take, that would be super, super helpful. Okay, with that, super excited to introduce you to your panelists today and your presenters. Many of you know my name is Christine Cruz-Vergara. I'm your Vice President for Higher Education and Student Success here at Handshake. I am joined by a very special guest today, Samantha Wheeler. She's the Associate Director of University Career Center at Villanova University. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for having me. I'm ecstatic to be here with you all today to talk about all things Big East Career Fair, Handshake's inaugural career fair.
We're very lucky to have you. Britt, he is our Product Marketing Manager. How are you doing today?
Doing so well. Happy Wednesday to y'all.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we have the formidable Jade Path, who is our product manager and the brainchild behind all of our virtual fairs. Hi, Jade.
Hi, Christine. Excited to talk about all things virtual fairs today.
Fantastic. Okay, let's go quickly through today's agenda so you know what to expect. First, we're going to walk through our product development process for virtual fairs. It mirrors the process that we use for other products, simply fast-tracked over the course of the past couple of months. Jade is going to walk you through a virtual fairs demo from the career services perspective, the employer perspective, and the student perspective, so you'll be able to see all of that. We're going to talk with Sam about the first virtual fair that we launched with the Big East in Villanova, and she's going to share some of her learning and best practices. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the roadmap and the fast follows and iterations that we're continuing to make and will be making as we continue into the fall semester. And then finally, we'll end with short Q&A. And as a reminder, all the recordings and slides will be sent to you after the event. All right, real quick before we jump right in, we have a couple more webinars that are coming up. So if you have not already registered for these, please feel free. The first is a back to school virtual engagement webinar that's happening next week. This is a refresher on all virtual features. So not just virtual fairs, but all other virtual features as well in Handshake, including some of the new employer virtual features. So we're gonna cover all of that next week. Please feel free to attend if you're interested. Second, we have Handshake Academy. We have just updated all of our virtual engagement training. So for those of you that might be wondering, wow, I'd love to have a personal demo. This is essentially your personal demo that you can watch over and over again with Tiffany Taylor right in your office. So please feel free to check out the Handshake Academy. You'll be able to get all of your training right there as well. And then finally, we have a virtual fair training for employers also next Wednesday. So feel free to invite any of your employers to attend that, so that they can get trained from us around virtual fairs too. Okay, all of these links and the recording and slides will be included in the follow-up email. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm gonna kick us off and then I'll be turning it over to Jade momentarily. As you all have seen before, this is our product process. We always start with research and strategy. We then go into design, building it, testing and analyzing, and finally iterating. This is a cyclical process. We do it for every single feature, everything that we build at Handshake. And last year, we revamped this process to make sure that we were including our university partners at each step along the way. So Jade, if you'll just click through, let's go ahead and remind everybody how they're involved each step of the way if they wish to be. For research and strategy, you're able to participate in our product workshops, where many of you might recall you participate in a lot of polls, we ask a lot of questions, and this is really where we're trying to scope and really define what is the problem? What's the problem we're trying to answer for? What is the challenge that we're trying to solve for? In the next stage for design, this is where we've developed mini advisory boards. Many thanks to those of you on the line that have actually served on or are currently serving on our mini advisory boards around reporting and events and career fairs and appointments and so many more that are coming down the pike as well. And then finally in Build, many of you participate in our product roadmap webinars. We'll have some coming up in September actually to talk a little bit about both the previous roadmap for the previous quarters, as well as upcoming roadmaps for what you can come to expect. We thank you for those that are in the testing and analyzing phase by serving in beta groups. Villanova and the Big East is a huge example of that. And finally, we always welcome product feedback as we continue to iterate, prioritize, and figure out what's coming next. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jade so that she can talk you through how we've essentially done that for the virtual fairs, especially for those of you that are new on the line. Jade, over to you.
Thanks, Christine. So I'll walk you through a real example of how this product planning process looked for the virtual fairs development cycle. In that research and strategy phase, we started off early in January and March by having advisory boards, particularly for events and fairs. And at that point, we were actually planning on building a much different set of tools to support career fairs in 2020. Now, once COVID-19 happened in March, we started to think about how that strategy could shift. And as we moved into the design phase, success and support surfaced a lot of feedback about how we could make the career fair process work in a virtual environment. So we started the design process in March of 2020 with a different angle than we originally intended. We started to build in April of 2020, and we actually started to test out what it could look like for a virtual fairs product. And we actually started to bring that to the market much earlier than we ever would have in the past, and back to the advisory boards with this new approach of a virtual fairs product. After we built that out with the scheduling component and the Handshake embedded video, which we found out were critical to the success of a virtual career fair product, we then confirmed with the Big East that we would run their fair on 7/30. And we did a full company test as well, where we were testing out our features with both customers and our Handshake team, and we learned a lot. And as we move into this iteration phase with virtual fairs, we have fast follows coming up in August and September, directly based on feedback from that Big East beta fair and some of the fairs running over the last few weeks. And we'll continue to make the virtual fairs product better using product feedback, continuing to lean on our advisory boards, and the process will, then restart. So I want to bring this to life with a real example. And with that, we'll actually move into a demo of the experience. So I'm actually going to switch over now to our Handshake site. And we're going to start with the employer side of the experience. So right now I'm viewing in Handshake as an employer user, and this employer user happens to already be approved for my fall 2020 virtual fair at Johnson Vaughan University. So the registration has already been approved, and the registration process is very similar to what existed for our physical career fair product. So we won't go through that. Just keep in mind that this career fair registration for the employer has already been approved. So you can see the new option here to add a schedule. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that add schedule option, and we're going to kick off the virtual fair creation. So once the employer clicks on the add schedule, they'll see the option to add sessions. I'm going to click on add sessions here. And the first step is for the employer to add which team members are going to be attending. So I'm going to go ahead and select myself and Katie Kelly as the two team members who are going to attend this fall 2020 virtual fair. You can see on the right that both Katie and I have active employer accounts, which is critical for this step of the process. Britt, on the other hand, is another one of our coworkers, but hasn't yet claimed that account. So he will need to do so before we can actually add him to this schedule. So all team members do have to have active Handshake employer accounts. And after that, we can click on Add Team to move on to the next step in this process. Next, we ask the employer if they're interested in hosting group sessions with students. In this case, I'm going to select yes, and then move on to that next question, which is, are you using Handshake Video or another video platform? I'm going to select Handshake Video, and right away, it alerts me to the fact that there is a 50-person student limit for Handshake hosted video sessions. So that's a good thing to keep in mind from this employer perspective. They can always use an external video platform if they feel more comfortable in something like Zoom, or if they are going to exceed that 50-person student limit. We'll give this a title and make sure that the student knows what the session is all about, and then we'll give this a description. After we add information about what the session is going to cover, we'll need to select a time for the group session. So I'm going to select here 11 to 11:30, and then I will confirm this group session. Once I've added that, then I go into the step of adding which team members will be participating in each group session. And since Gergen Group just has the one group session in this case, I'm going to add both myself and my coworker, Katie Kelly, to host and facilitate that group session. I'll click Assign Team, and then move on to the next step in the process, which you can follow along on the left, to add one-on-one sessions. I'm going to click Add One-on-One Sessions for myself, and I don't have any preferences as just a recruiter here, so I'm going to select No for preferences on these sessions, click Schedule, and then for Katie Kelly, I'll do the same. I'll add one-on-one sessions, but in this case, she is looking at speaking with students who have certain information on their Handshake profiles, so I'm going to click Yes to add preferences to sessions, and then click Add Requirements. In this case, I'll add a couple school years, so juniors and seniors, and then I'll also add a major group here of arts and design to make sure that Katie Kelly is meeting with only students who match these preferences. I'll click Add Schedule Sessions here, and then Assign Team. The last step in this process is the review. So I'm going to take a look, make sure that my group sessions and one-on-one sessions look okay, and then click Confirm Schedule and Invite Team. Once I do that, it's going to drop me back on that Schedule tab as the employer, and I'm going to need to reload to review the sessions that I've added. So we'll go ahead and click Reload here. And now I can see my schedule. So here I'm seeing myself. I can also filter to see Katie Kelly's schedule. And if I scroll down, I'll see my one-on-one sessions, as well as that group session here. And because we're creating this and this fair is happening today, I also see that option to launch this video session, which the employers can do 60 minutes ahead of that. I'm going to hand it back over to Britt to talk through some of the employer considerations.
Thanks, Jade. Yeah, so having seen the employer experience, we wanted to share a few key considerations that you can keep in mind for making employers successful. Now, I'll mention that we've got a whole host of resources to help you with this that we're going to talk about in today's webinar a little bit later. And I also wanted to note that we're going to be sharing this deck with everybody who registered for the webinar in our follow-up email. So you'll be able to review all of these points later. I'm going to move through them a little bit quickly so we can get through all of our content. First up, all employer participants must have a Handshake account in order to attend the fair. So that's a good thing to keep in mind if you're talking to employers who are looking to attend. Employers who are not approved at your school overall will still be able to register for the fair, but if you haven't yet approved them, they won't be able to view student profiles or message students after the fair. So they'll be able to participate, host sessions, students will be able to attend, but they won't be able to do any follow-up or see the students who registered for their sessions. So it's a good idea to double check to make sure that everyone who has been approved to attend your fair has also been approved at your school. Jade covered this, but employers should be encouraged to use descriptive titles for their group sessions so that students know what's going to be covered in them. And this just helps provide a better student experience. And then finally, employers now have a couple of abilities to edit their schedule after they've been published. We're going to be adding a few more bits of functionality on that front later, and we'll talk about that later in today's presentation. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Jade to talk about the career services experience.
Thanks, Britt. Let's jump back into Handshake. And now you can see my view is changed. I'm viewing actually as a career services staff member now, and I'm on that fall 2020 virtual fair overview page. A couple things to call out here that are new. First, the number of students that have session signups. This means the total number of students that have signed up for a session after they registered for the fair. So it's a good thing to keep an eye on this. Make sure that as students are registering for your virtual fair, they're also signing up for sessions. The next thing that's new here is the registration types. So the total number of group sessions that have been requested, the total number of one-on-one sessions available, and then the total filled. Also a really good idea to keep an eye on this and make sure that those one-on-one sessions are filling up for your employers that are registered. I'm going to click on View Employers here so we can take a look at some of the new fields here. Let's scroll down and look at this line for Gergen Group, who we just registered for this fair. So you can see here we have a couple new fields. The first is Schedule Representatives. So I see that now as 1 out of 2 because I claimed my schedule as I created that registration, but now we're waiting on Katie Kelly to actually log in and claim her part of the schedule before that will increase to 2 out of 2. You can see that we've requested 1 group session. There are no students registered for that group session yet, but we just created it, so that should be okay. And then 0 out of 27 one-on-one sessions filled, so 27 total one-on-one sessions that students can sign up for. A really good idea to monitor these fields and make sure that students are signing up and that employers are claiming these schedules. If they don't create the schedule and you see a 0 in that first row here, then you will want to make sure to follow up with these employers and make sure that they know that that is required to participate. If we click into Gergen Group here, there are also a couple new things. The employer group sessions, which you can see here, and you can read those descriptions that we talked about. And then the individual sessions. So who has sessions? You can see since Katie Kelly hasn't claimed that schedule yet, she has 0 open sessions. But once she does claim that, it will increase to 27. I will hand it back over to Britt to talk through some of the university considerations.
Yeah, so knowing what Jade just shared about monitoring employer registrations, schedule creation, and session signups, here are a couple of important tips to keep in mind. So employers whose sessions are full can be encouraged to add more sessions if they haven't yet hit our limits. So right now they can add up to 3 group sessions and as many 10-minute one-on-one sessions as fit into the fair. And on the flip side of that, employers who are seeing low one-on-one session signups ahead of the fair can be encouraged to loosen any one-on-one qualifications they might have set. So if they were, previously setting a qualification based on GPA, they might be encouraged to remove that so that they can meet with more students. And then finally, when you're thinking about driving student awareness of employer sessions, considering digital sponsorship offerings is a really great idea. So basically driving awareness about employer attendance via email or social media marketing can be a great way to drive additional revenue for your office and also drive students to those employer sessions. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Jade.
Okay, let's jump into the last part of the demo. And now we're in the student experience. So I'm on the student dashboard, and I'm going to go ahead and click on events in the top navigation. And then I'm going to click on that Fall 2020 virtual fair here. I can read a little bit about the fair, scroll down, review some of the employers that are attending. And then as a student, I'm going to go ahead and register for this fair. They see a couple of best practices to mark their calendar and sign up for sessions. And then I'm going to click on register to complete this step as a student. Once they register, they'll be sent to the available sessions tab, which is brand new. And then they can scroll through and start to see which employers have sessions that they're interested in attending. So let's scroll down, take a look at some of the sessions and descriptions. And then we'll stop at Gergen Group, which is that employer that we registered for. We reviewed their registration as a career services user. And now let's go ahead and sign up for that marketing department AMA. Read about the session, read about what types of students this employer is looking for, and then click confirm to join this group session as a student. If we're also interested in checking out some of the one-on-ones with Gergen Group, then I can click one-on-ones and I can see which sessions work with myself who has registered. I can see all of the available times here. And then let's go ahead and click, we'll claim this 10:30 session here and confirm that. And then if we scroll up, these sessions are going to be added to the Your Sessions section of the student schedule. And they'll also be able to click on Your Sessions located in this top tab to see which sessions they have available. 5 minutes before the session starts, this join video link will be live so that the student can click on that join video and then start the session with the employer. They can also look for open sessions during the times of their schedule that they don't have any set for yet. And then the last thing, I'll go back to the student dashboard here just to show once a student is registered for the fair and the fair is on that day, they will see a new call to action on the main dashboard that allows them to go straight to their schedule, and this will appear for the entire time that the fair is happening on the day of. Okay, and let's jump back into our deck now and take a look at a quick view of the student experience. Once they're in that video session, then they'll be able to speak directly with the employer on video, and they'll be able to use the chat on the right side of the screen here. So just wanted to give everyone a quick preview of the video experience here once they click join video from that schedule tab. And then Britt, finally, we'll talk about some considerations for student success.
Awesome. Yeah, and before I do that, we had a couple of questions come in about the concept of employers needing to claim a schedule. So I just wanted to clarify, one employer user can register for the fair and set up schedules for all of the reps that are going to come, but each individual rep that is attending needs to click a button in an email to essentially accept that schedule as their own. It's a necessary step that we call claiming the schedule in order for them to participate. So they will get an email once the schedule has been created and they click a button to accept it. With that said, let's do some key considerations for student success. So students should be encouraged to sign up for sessions ahead of the fair. It's actually a requirement right now that they register and sign up for a session before the session starts in order to be able to attend. So if a session started 5 minutes ago and you haven't registered for it, you're not able to attend it. So students should really be pushed to do that in advance. This is also really important, scheduling in advance to help ensure employers that they're going to have great students to meet with during the fair. Another consideration is that, as we mentioned and shown, one-on-one sessions with employers might have preferences. So students should be encouraged to fill out their profiles ahead of time, including work authorization. The qualifications that can be used are work authorization, GPA, major, and school year. We're also going to be adding a prompt in the career fair feature set to remind students to do this as well to help out with that. And then finally, students should set their profile visibility to community in order to participate in group sessions and one-on-ones. There is a prompt for this in the Handshake app, but it's also a good thing to kind of share with them in advance in order to participate. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to take us through some highlights from the Big East Fair, which happened 2 weeks ago now. So the Big East Fair aimed to help recent 2020 grads who were still looking for a job connect with great employers. And in the end, we saw 201 new grads meet with 85 employer representatives from almost 40 employers. And overall, that meant that 899 employer to student connections happened overall. So this is a really great example of meaningful scaled interactions still happening in a virtual context. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to show you what drop-off looked like between registration, session sign up, and attendance. So students who clicked register on the fair versus students who signed up for an individual session versus students who attended on the day of. So as you'd expect with any event, there was a drop-off between those who registered and actually attended. But once a student signed up for a session, they were very likely to attend. So this is why pushing students to sign up for individual one-on-ones or group sessions is a great way to ensure that they're going to come on the day of. But another takeaway here is that, like with in-person events, you want to over-invite to make sure that you get good attendance on the day of. On the next slide, I have the attendance rates broken down by one-on-one and groups. So 81% of students who signed up for a one-on-one session attended, and 68% who signed up for a group session attended. So as expected, we saw a higher show rate for one-on-ones. Now, pulling this off across multiple schools was a huge feat, and I wanted to say that we're really grateful to Kevin Grubb and Sam Wheeler, who you'll hear from in a minute, for taking the reins from Villanova, and for the entire Big East for being really incredible partners and sharing invaluable feedback with us before, during, and after the Big East Fair. Here are a few quotes that we got from the Big East in our follow-up session to the fair. Karen from DePaul shared that this was a really great opportunity for the class of 2020 at a time when they really needed it. Kevin from Villanova shared to being the first set of schools to test Handshake's virtual fair features. The first 25.2 miles of the marathon have been really well run, and we are now just sort of like perfecting what is already a really great product. And Gary from Butler shared that virtual fairs are going to be a great addition to their fall programming. So again, thanks so much to the Big East for being fabulous partners. We also got to connect with some of the employers who were in attendance at the fair. Here's one quote that we received. This employer had a really good experience, got to meet with great candidates, and importantly, was already planning to follow up with them. Again, this is all about making really meaningful virtual connections, and following up after the event is a really critical part of continuing those connections. We also spoke to some Big East grads who were in attendance. Here's a quote we wanted to highlight. This grad expressed that scheduling sessions in advance was a good way to mitigate what can be a really overwhelming experience at an in-person fair. And they were also really pleased with the array of employers that attended. So kudos to the Big East for drawing in some great names. So now let's transition to talking about some of our learnings and best practices that we gleaned from the Big East Fair and from conversations with our partners. So I'm first going to turn things over to Christine for some opening thoughts, and then we're going to hear from Sam Wheeler from Villanova.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. So one of the biggest takeaways that we had in talking with the Big East and really experiencing this for the first time is that it requires a shift in mindset. Both our shift in mindset on the career services end, but then also helping students and employers to shift their mindset. Now, one of the biggest things that you can do is help to paint a picture of what the future can look like for your employers. I know that for some schools, you're hearing employers say, well, what is this going to be? There won't be lines. I won't be able to go up to a student. What might that look like? And so for them, you can let them know that students are actually quite excited to be able to ditch the lines. They're excited to be able to not be in a crowded gym or ballroom and to be able to have some dedicated one-on-one as well as group time. And for an employer, they're not going to be signing up for a fair, sitting in a chat room, wondering if anyone's going to actually come up to them. That is one of the most common questions that we actually hear on our employer team is, will the school be using Handshake's virtual fair? Because we want to make sure that we're actually able to set up a schedule and have a general idea of what to expect for the day, and if students will actually be there, and will I even get a chance to talk to 5 students? versus signing up for a fair where you're sitting and not knowing if anyone is going to be coming up. So those are some of the things that you can really help to express to an employer. I actually just learned last night that we have officially surpassed employer registration numbers in totality for this year versus last year. And I'm going to totally take this from Sam. So Sam, I hope you don't mind that I'm answering and giving this little tidbit, but Villanova actually just surpassed their goal for their own individual fair that they have later this fall. They had hoped to get 50 and they've already surpassed that and hit 70, including some employers that they didn't expect to get and that they haven't been able to get in the past going to physical fairs. They are now able to get this year coming to a virtual fair. So these are some of the exciting things that I encourage you to bring to life for employers as you're talking to them. For students, know that this is a way for them to get out of the COVID holding pattern. For many students, they haven't had the chance to actually get face-to-face or be able to talk to a real employer in months. This is an opportunity for them to sign up for schedules so that they actually can do that. And we heard that directly from students in the Big East. So that was very exciting. Finally, let your team know that this is also going to fundamentally feel and look different for them the day of the fair. Normally, for most career fairs, it's all hands on deck. You need every single staff member to be there for registration, setup, so on and so forth. And now you actually don't. You're going to buy back time for your team. While you will certainly use some staff time to manage the fair the day of, you're not going to need your entire team the way that you did before. And so that allows you to reallocate time saved back to your team. Be sure to try new methods. So for example, if you say virtual fair and for your particular audience or culture at your institution, that is making them think of certain things and that's not how you want them to think of it, try calling it a virtual recruiting event, right? Try thinking of expanding your invitation list, both to employers or students in different ways than you might have before. So these are just some of the immediate tips that I would share with you that were big takeaways from our conversation with the Big East. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam so she can tell you a little bit more about some of the tactical pieces.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Samantha Wheeler here from the Villanova University Career Center. I'm so ecstatic to be here with you today to talk about the Big East Fair and some of the best practices that we'll be implementing at Villanova for our future events. So a bit of background on me. I am Villanova's primary Handshake contact, and I've been working directly with the amazing Handshake team for almost 4 full years now in my position as Associate Director of Digital Media and Assessment. Currently, I serve on both the events and fairs and the Data and Insights Advisory Boards for Handshake. And as you know, I recently had the great pleasure of being the Career Services Lead for the Big East Class of 2020 Virtual Fair. I can't believe that the fair is already over and that it's August. School starts here for us next week. It's currently pouring down rain on move-in day for our first year students. The tricks that 2020 has up its sleeve are never ending and the craziness can be exhausting. I'm sure most of you are feeling the same way as the school year kicks off, but I hope that today's session adds some calm to your fair planning process. For the Big East Fair, I took the lead on all operational and functional pieces from the career services side, including all of the marketing and communication with our students, alumni, and employers through the platform. I was also there day of to help with any troubleshooting and support leading up to and during the fair. We had support from the other Big East schools as well, so thank you to all of those teams for helping in all the ways that you did to make this event a huge success. Also, huge shout out, as Christine mentioned, to Kevin Grubb, who's the executive director here at Villanova of our Career Center. He really spearheaded this whole project and we couldn't have done it without him. Now to dive into our approach to virtual fairs and some of the best practices that we found using Handshake as a virtual platform. I will say that in my 4 years here in this role at Villanova, I have helped with over 25 different fairs as the lead Handshake contact. For me, when I think of Fair Day, I think of making sure name tags are printing correctly with our Dymo printers, that employers can check in smoothly, and that we are collecting the data that we need to report out after the event. For me, seeing those 20 fairs and working on the Big East Fair, I have to say that this was the easiest fair that I've ever helped to manage. It was so calming, and yes, I said calming, for me to have the fair start and know that everything was going on successfully in Handshake. Knowing that the students and the employers were successfully connecting was powerful to me as a career services staff member. We found in planning for Day of Support that we needed a way for students and employers to ask our team questions during the fair. We set up a different Zoom room for each audience and communicated those links out before the fair, with the goal being that anyone with questions could connect directly with Big East staff members in a place that felt comfortable to them. A takeaway that we learned from this was that students were confused about where the fair was happening. They weren't aware that Handshake had the ability to host a career fair. So we're making sure going forward in our educational pieces that students understand that the fair is happening in product, that they won't need to go to a Zoom or other URL to be able to access their connections with employers. With over 200 students who attended the event, we had less than 10 students who came to the Zoom support room. We had 8 career services staff members in the room. So as Christine mentioned, the all hands on deck approach to career fairs may not be necessary for this virtual setting. Moving on, designing evergreen employer and student registration surveys. If you've ever heard me present before, I'm always using this evergreen term, which is a way to explain making one survey that you can use for all of your fairs. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for each fair. If you have some solid questions that you can ask in all of the fairs that you're creating, having a survey template will streamline your process and make it easier to analyze data across fairs. Another aspect that we're embracing at Villanova is leveraging the Handshake platform for pre-fair educational events. We didn't want the large career fair to be the very first event that we had on the platform for our students. So we're having 2 events that are occurring before the fair that will use the fair module in Handshake. Both our resume review day and our inclusive hiring meetup will have employers and students utilizing the platform to its fullest extent before our large scale event in September. Something to think about as you're planning your fairs is partnering with non-Handshake schools. 10 out of the 11 Big East institutions are Handshake schools, so it was a unique process for us working with a non-Handshake school in this virtual setting. We also were working with an invite-only group of students. I believe that Handshake is working on some really great resources to walk through both of these use cases and what it will look like if you're trying to implement either of them. The last thing I wanted to cover with you today is just the absolute amazingness of the Handshake Virtual Fair Launch Kit. And I do want to give a massive shout out to Tanya, whose beautiful face is on the top of most of those articles. She's made some amazing articles that I reference on a daily basis. And I actually have the launch kit as the very first bookmark on my taskbar, and I reference it probably hourly at this point. So using the articles available is a great first line of defense to answer any of the questions that you or your team, students, alumni, and staff may have about the platform. Handshake has great walkthrough videos that you can reference in educational settings, such as workshops or emails, that go through step-by-step for students and employers about how they can register and interact in the fair. Similarly, I would recommend that when you're communicating with students and employers, that you're including links to these specific resources. We embedded the links directly in the descriptions and welcome messaging for the fairs, which seemed to limit the number of questions that we received directly from students and employers. We're also in the process of creating an FAQ sheet for attaching to each fair. Again, an evergreen document that we can attach to all of our fairs. The FAQs will cover everything from registration steps to sign up for the fair to what individuals should do if they're not able to attend their sessions. My last tip is to incorporate the Handshake links on publicly available websites. The reason I say this is because we tend to see that parents are doing research and sharing information with students on the different opportunities that are available to them through our Career Center. We created a brand new How to Navigate a Virtual Event page on our website where we link all of these great Handshake resources along with the individual event registrations. Wrapping up, I'd like to reiterate that the Big East Fair is the easiest fair I've ever managed. It was amazing to be able to sit in my comfy home office chair and not be running around the gymnasium to make sure that the slideshow presentation was working on the big screen. I want to thank Jade, Britt, and the rest of the Handshake team for everything that they did to make this event an success and to ensure that everyone on the Handshake platform has an amazing platform for our virtual events going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that you and the entire team were incredible to work with. And we're really grateful to have you as partners. And thank you so much for sharing all of those tips. Those are all really excellent. And I know we're going to be sharing the deck out later again, so people will have access to them. I want to talk about another learning that we had, and one that's been amplified by our partners. Basically, there are a lot of unknowns around employer and student participation in virtual fairs. It's kind of hard to understand how they might compare to in-person fairs. So with that said, we wanted to put together some guidelines that you could use to keep your fairs on track. And in the next couple of slides after this, I'll talk about how Handshake is also working alongside you to bolster your numbers. So if you are opening up employer registration up to 2 months ahead of time, which is what we recommend, by 3 weeks out, 3 weeks before the fair, you want to aim to hit over 80% of your expected employer registrations. And we've actually seen that using last year's employer attendance can be a good way to set that expected number. A week later, so 2 weeks out, you should aim to have 80% of registered employers with a completed schedule. And as Jade showed us, you'll have visibility into which employers have created schedules so you can reach out to them if need be. But again, it's important for employers to have created schedules so that students actually have something to sign up for when they go in and register for the fair. A week before the fair, you should aim to have 50% of students who have registered signed up for at least one employer session slot in advance. Students will be able to sign up for slots on the day of, as long as the session hasn't already started. But signing up for them ahead of time helps students not only plan in advance, but also helps employers feel more comfortable with the value of attending your fair. You can still set the expectation that students will sign up for sessions on the day of, but having some pre-registrants will definitely help on that front. As I mentioned, you'll be able to see employer registrations, schedule creation, and student signups from the virtual fair page. So make sure you're monitoring that regularly to hit the thresholds that are mentioned on this slide. As we mentioned before, definitely err on the side of inviting more students. Like with in-person events, not all students will register, not all students who register will come. And finally, make sure that your invite and reminder emails to students encourage them to sign up for sessions in advance. This makes them more likely to attend and helps employers feel better. So let's talk about how Handshake is going to partner with you in making your virtual fairs a success. We've got a lot of great systems and processes put in place that help drive student attendance. So Jade showed us the banner on the student dashboard that helps students navigate to the event on the day of the fair. That will show up for every student who has registered for the fair. Upon registering, we have a pop-up, and Jade showed this as well, that encourages students to sign up for individual employer sessions. In addition, Handshake also sends system-generated reminder emails to registered students. So they'll get a confirmation email after they register, which you can see on the right here. They'll get a reminder 2 days before the fair, which is the email on the far right, and they'll get a reminder on the day of the fair. And the call to action, basically what we're trying to get them to do with those emails is to go into Handshake, sign up for sessions, and review their schedule. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, here are a couple of other ways that we're looking to improve student attendance that are coming soon. And actually, this first bullet point is no longer coming soon, it's launched. So we revamped the template in product that you can use to invite students to fairs. So if you're looking at your career fair, there is a tab in the upper right that allows you to invite students. And that email has gotten a lovely refresh to make the calls to action to register for the fair more prominent. And actually, a quick early statistic on that one, we originally saw an open rate on that email of about 31%, and already open rates on the new version of the email are cracking 50%, which is incredible. Industry averages typically hover around the low 20s for open rates, so that's a great email template to use. We're also building what we're calling a just-in-time email to help drive more students to your virtual fairs if the system detects very low student signups for employer sessions. This email is going to be live in September. The goal of the email is to ensure that employers have students to meet with at the fair, providing the employer with a positive experience. The email is sent the day before the fair if less than 50% of available session slots have been taken. The potential audience for this email is activated undergraduate students whose actions in Handshake, basically the companies that they follow, the career interests they've shared, suggest that they might be interested in one or more employer sessions at the fair that currently have low signups. So essentially, if we see that there are low signups overall for the fair, we will call out specific employer sessions that have low signups to students that might be interested in it. Now note, we will not send the just-in-time email if more than 50% of available employer sessions have been taken the day before. We will also not send the email for invite-only events because in that case, you have strictly defined the list of invited students. Similarly, if you've set qualifications for your virtual fair, so you only have it open to, say, juniors and seniors or engineering students, we will respect those qualifications when choosing students to suggest the fair to. And again, at the end of the day, this is really about driving student attendance so that you can maintain good credibility with employers and students as well. Now on the next slide, I want to talk about some of the ways that we're helping drive employers to virtual fairs. I won't go into full detail here, but remember that you're getting this deck after the webinar, so you'll be able to review. Basically, we're sending a variety of different emails and in-product pop-ups to employers to let them know that virtual fairs exist on Handshake and linking them to go and explore more of them. There are some cool triggers here. So some of these are just going to be posted to everybody, but one that I'll call out is that we're sending an email we're sending an email to employers when student registration opens at a fair to prompt employers to search for and invite students proactively. Okay, next slide. So with all of this in mind, I want to wrap up this section by sharing recommendations for marketing your fair to students and employers. Your first stop should absolutely be the Virtual Fair Launch Kit, which is stocked with promotional and educational materials about virtual fairs. The resources address career services, but also students and employers. So we have how-to guides, email templates, videos, webinars, and more that are a great way to supplement your marketing plan. This is all pre-built collateral that you can use, and it bridges the gap between marketing and also education. So there's great resources here. I'm going to throw the link in the chat. Definitely check it out. And if we go to the next slide, here's an example of the list of resources that you can use to help engage students. So we have everything from templates to help you invite and introduce students to fairs, blog posts you can send to students on how to prepare for a virtual fair, and help articles on the nuts and bolts of participating. And there are a similar list of great resources for employers as well. I know we've been getting a lot of questions in the chat about a testing guide for career services. That's also included on the Virtual Fair Launch Kit. So if you haven't already checked this out, highly, highly recommend that you do. I know Sam mentioned it, using it as well for the Big East. We are also always open to hearing other types of assets or collateral that you think might be useful here. So please feel free to let us know. Okay, now to wrap things up, I wanted to share a quick example of how you might deploy these resources along with a few other tips that we've discussed today in a marketing plan for an upcoming fair. Now, again, you're going to be able to review this in close detail in the follow-up email, and we actually we're turning this marketing plan into a blog post that we'll share out shortly. But that said, this is how you might structure your marketing plan using assets from the Virtual Fair Launch Kit. So we recommend inviting employers 4 to 8 weeks out. We've got an employer invite template that you can use to do that. When you're reminding employers to set up their schedules, we've got a help article with a video on how to set them up. We also have a great blog post on 7 ways that employers can stand out in a virtual context. When it comes to starting to invite students, we've got templates for you to do that. We've got articles and videos on what a virtual fair is and how to join. And then, as I mentioned, for your team, we have a complete guide to Handshake's virtual fair that includes details on how you can run a test fair. And we've also got a really great blog post from our head of support on how to staff your fair the day of. So again, you'll get this as a follow-up, and these are just meant to be recommendations, but we think this is a great way to go about promoting your fair. And with that, I want to pass it over to Jade to talk through our roadmap of recently released and upcoming updates for virtual fairs.
Great. So let's run through first what's coming up soon on the virtual fair roadmap. For career services, soon there will be quick downloads that have information about student and employer sign up and attendance. A couple questions coming in around check-in, so that will be addressed in those quick downloads. Students will have multiple check-ins in a virtual career fair, so the data will look a little bit different. We'll also be working on making sure that the day of is a little bit more visible to career services with a view that shows you which sessions are happening by time and then links off to relevant resources. For employers, the first part of schedule editing is live. So this will allow employers to go back and change their one-on-one session preferences and edit their sessions to mark them as busy. There is a next set of schedule editing work that's coming later on closer to September, and we'll keep everyone in the loop via the product announcements. The representative account type is also live, so this will allow a reduced permissions account for employers. And then coming soon for employers is changing the max group sessions from 3 up to 5, and then increasing the representatives from 15 to 30 on those employer schedules. For students, we're adding in profile and work authorization prompts as they register for the fair to make sure that their profile is as complete as it can be and they can see all available sessions. We're adding the raise hand and unmute participants for group meetings, and this will allow an employer to indicate that the student can unmute themselves to have a better host facilitation. And then Android app functionality is also coming soon. Areas that we're digging into a little bit deeper in terms of research and exploration, the career services day of experience. Like I said, we're building out that view of the sessions by time. But we'll also be looking at what does it look like for career services to actually host group and one-on-one sessions. We'll be looking at more in-depth reporting updates, session recordings for employers, interpreter workflows to address some accessibility updates, small video experience enhancements, making sure that all types of employers can use our video functionality and that it's very clear what tests need to be done before. We'll also be looking into the 10-minute one-on-one session length and then the approval workflows to make sure that it's very clear to you if an employer is not approved at your school but has created a pending registration for the fair. And we'll be looking at better student outreach tools, maybe via templates and targeted emails, as well as automated emails. And with that, I will pass it over to Christine to kick us off for Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jade. I appreciate it. I'm going to capture a big one that is coming in from lots of people. Great feature. Will we have to opt into the just-in-time email to encourage students to sign up for employers with low sign-up rates? So 1, thank you for all the excitement and enthusiasm about it. And 2, the answer is no, you do not need to opt into that. We've got it taken care of. We got you. Don't worry. We're going to make sure that you are successful in all of that. So thank you for the many individuals that have sent that in. We're excited that that is going to be useful to all of you. All right, let's jump into some of these questions. The first question, I'll actually take this one, is around whether or not students are going to do things in advance. How do we serve all types of student populations? And this is a really great question. As I mentioned before, it's a little 50-50. 1, we wanted to make sure that we're meeting students where they are currently. But 2, we also recognize that some of the new virtual fair experience, or quite frankly, virtual experience as a whole, is going to require a little bit of a shift in mindset. So first of all, let me be very clear. While we certainly encourage students to pre-schedule, pre-register, it's one of the ways in which they can best use their time. It also isn't required to do before the day of the fair. A student could also attend your fair when it starts the day of, and also register and create their schedule in that moment, similar to if they were going to your fair. They could show up the day of, they can look at the list of employers, and they can decide who they would like to meet with in that moment. So that is also possible. Now, that being said, we do encourage all career professionals, I was certainly one for many years, to encourage students to take that time to prepare. They're going to feel better. they're going to feel more prepared. They're going to be able to showcase their best self as well. And it does allow them to think of this particular type of experience a little bit differently than just a pop-in, but rather an opportunity to be able to have a real conversation and have a more meaningful connection than one in which they might have only had just 30 seconds or a minute to be able to do a pitch. All right, I'm going to give this next question over to Samantha. Samantha, what were some of the problems that you had to troubleshoot during your virtual career fair? What do you wish you could have done better at the career fair? And what will you do differently at your next fair?
Great question. I think hopefully some of those questions were answered in what I went over today and what was on the slide, some of the learnings. But I think the biggest thing that we took away from it is just making sure that we're educating students and employers that Handshake has this functionality. So the fair is embedded in the platform, and they can use that, one-stop shop to do all of the in-fair interactions.
Terrific, wonderful. Another question for you, Sam, before I let you go. Is there a post-event survey function built in, or do you have recommendations on how to best survey employers after the fair?
Yeah, that's another great question. There is not, as far as I know, a post-fair survey for employers or for students that's built into the platform. What we do on our end for students is we go through and label the students who attended the fair and invite them to our post-fair survey. And then for our employers, we export all of in this case, we'll export the registrant data and the representative data and send it to our Office of Strategic Planning and Institutional Effectiveness. And they'll send out the survey for us to our employers so that they'll get notifications and reminders through Qualtrics.
Awesome, fantastic. We have a question here about charging employers. I know we can't charge for additional representatives, but are we able to charge different pricing options for different groups? For example, a different price for nonprofit versus corporate, as an example. And the answer is yes. Your employer pricing is completely up to you. So however you wish to charge your employers, if you historically have done a different rate for nonprofit versus government versus for-profit, you're welcome to continue to repeat that. We know that some have chosen to reduce some of their employer registration fees, so absolutely you can take care of charging your employers as you see fit. I'm going to ask a next question for Jade, actually. We have some questions about the 10-minute time length for one-on-one sessions and whether or not that is too long or too short. So we have lots of folks that really like the 10 minutes, and then we have some folks that think it might be too long, and we have some folks that think it might be too short. So could you share a little bit about our thinking for how we landed on 10 minutes, as well as some of the initial feedback that we're seeing there?
Yeah, 10 minutes, we decided at 10 minutes after speaking with a lot of employers and students, but really knew that since we've never hosted a virtual fair, that we would have to monitor that 10-minute session length pretty closely. So after the Big East Fair, we did send a survey to both employers and students who attended. And so far, the data right now, employers, 7% said that the time was too long. The rest said either just right or too short. So on the employer side, really leaning towards that 10-minute session length right now. And then on the student side, actually for too long, only 0 students said that the 10-minute session length was too long. The rest said it was either just right or too short. So right now through August, we feel pretty confident that we're going to leave that 10-minute session length as is, but we also know that's a small set of data, so we'll continue to monitor this and we'll continue to monitor this and make sure that we are reevaluating if we start to see different results. And I may have misspoken. 0 students said 10 minutes was too long, in case I misquoted there.
Perfect. Thank you, Jade. Sounds good. All right, we're going to do, let's see, we've got another question coming in. For Sam, you mentioned that the Big East used the Career Fair platform to host a resume review day event prior to the fair. How are resumes, documents, and screen shares done in the one-on-one session to allow for quality resume review experience?
Awesome. So just to clarify, we actually have not had this event yet. It's an event that's happening before Villanova's fall career fair. So all of those pre-fair events that I was suggesting, our resume review and our inclusive hiring meetup. They're events that are happening in the future that are just for Villanova students. But we're setting it up. Students have to have their resume attached to their profile and be able to have employers see it. And then the employers will set up their schedules in 10-minute blocks that students can meet with them and get feedback on their resume directly through the Handshake platform. So that's really how we're thinking about using a platform. You know, Zoom, we could have done something similar in Zoom, but our hope was that getting students into the Handshake platform and having them see the robustness of what they're able to do in there would be a good educational piece for teaching them and having them learn about how the platform will work for the in-person, oh my gosh, for the live fair that's happening in the middle of September. I also saw in the questions, not to jump in here, Christine, but there were a bunch of about the FAQs and the surveys that we had used and kind of those evergreen documents that I was talking about. So I did create a Google folder that has some of those resources in there that please feel free to repurpose, keep as much of it or as little of it as you want. It's in the chat, the link there. So for anyone who wants to not reinvent the wheel and kind of use what we've already pulled together, you're more than willing to use that.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you for all of you that have been on the line. As a reminder, we will send out a follow-up email. It will include the recording of this webinar. It will include all of our slides. It will include links to all of the resources, including the virtual launch kit that we talked to you about, as well as links to the Handshake Academy, which is essentially your own personal demo that you can watch over and over and over again. So thank you so much. You're going to see a short survey, and we hope you have a great day. Bye, everyone.